July 1945. Northern waters of the Pacific, the approaches to Hokkaido and southern Sakhalin. A U.S. submarine runs at low speed along the edge of a broad continental shelf. The bridge watch keeps its glasses on a dark shoreline where an iron line cuts a faint seam through scrub and dunes. Freight moves on that line after nightfall. Daylight belongs to small patrol posts, scattered lookouts, and the routine that keeps the local garrisons fed. The air is cold and smells of metal and seaweed. The situation is simple and persistent. The war is nearing its end, but it still demands calculated risk, strict timing, and work done without spectacle. The crew has learned the lesson of the later Pacific months. Decisive outcomes come not only from fleet actions, but also from local strikes that the enemy did not plan for and cannot easily answer. The boat has been in these latitudes long enough to mark coastal points on chart and memory. On the plot lie small harbors, sheds of coastal depots, signal masts, and the faint hooks of piers. Recent nights have proved a new use of the submarine's deck space, launching unguided rockets at shore targets when conditions allow a short surface dash. By day, the periscope shows silhouettes and shore contours through haze. By night, the radar paints low headlands and fishing craft as unstable pips. The pattern is deliberate. Short sorties to the surface, rapid fire at specific shore structures, and a return to the quiet routine under battery power. Shore posts reconcile their reports by habit. If fires bloom inland after midnight, they write air raid, because the term fits the form of their reports and the expectations of their seniors. A submarine benefits from that habit. When the defender assigns the wrong cause to an event, he commits forces to the wrong remedy, and time is lost. Observation adds one more constant. A railroad runs along the coast, never far from the sound of the surf, sometimes crossing small bridges, sometimes curving behind dunes. Trains run regularly. Some are short strings of wagons behind a modest locomotive. Others are longer and carry what garrisons need to sustain a fixed routine: coal, crates, sacks, spares, and men. For a submarine with torpedoes and a deck gun, a train is an absurd target in theory. It is on land, yet the logistics link is obvious even to men who fight in salt water. Disable a stretch of track at the right point under the right locomotive, and the effect will propagate through schedules, patrol patterns, and guard rotations. The idea first appears as a question, spoken in a normal tone during a quiet dog watch. It persists through the next day's chart checks. It becomes a plan when a technician states, in a practical voice, that weight on a rail can be made into a switch, and a switch can complete a firing circuit. The logic of the plan is conservative. A shore party will land at night, approach the rail bed from the seaside, and place an explosive charge under a section chosen for easy masking of wires and clean soil. A plain time fuse introduces uncertainty. A radio command link introduces failure modes. Both are rejected. The mass of the locomotive is precise and punctual. When the wheels depress the rail and load the ballast, a concealed contact can close the circuit and fire the charge at the only moment that matters. The necessary components are not exotic. A robust blasting charge, a simple shielded contact assembly that can withstand the vibration of a passing train before the one that matters, and wire long enough to seat the firing battery at a small remove from the rail bed if needed. The rest is fieldcraft and speed. Selection of the landing party is practical. 8 men are detailed. They are not a ceremonial commando unit. They are a working set built from specialties the boat already has, an electrician who knows how switches behave under load and moisture, a signalman who can keep time and distance in the dark, a boatswain who will keep the rhythm of the approach and the return, a machinist who handles tools without sound, and hands from the torpedo and engine rooms who can move weight, dig, and mask work fast. 2 will secure the beach and guard the boats. 6 will go to the rail. The explosive is the same class of charge carried to deny a captured submarine to an enemy. It is reliable, it has the needed energy, and the crew knows its handling procedures in full. Short-handled digging tools are fabricated out of sight. Lights receive hoods to force narrow beams. Pistol magazines are checked and then ignored except for emergency use. The route inland is walked on the chart twice and again with the memory of daylight periscope bearings. Night selection is measured against moon and forecast. The boat surfaces at a conservative distance, then shifts to a closer position when lookouts report no activity near the likely patrol hut. The hull is kept aligned so that, after recovery, no turning is required before heading seaward. Rubber boats go down without talk. Checks are made by touch and habit. Oars take the water together. The sound carries in a particular way inside a low fog. Every few dozen strokes the coxswain lifts his head, listens for engine sounds or voices, and then bends again to his task. The chosen landing point is a low slot in the shoreline where reeds meet flat sand. It is preferred because it offers a way back with few obstacles and because it shows no recent traffic. The first pair leaves the boats and lies flat until the shape of the second pair resolves against the darker line of grass. The 2 assigned to boat guard crawl to the right and left to gain a better field of view along the beach. The 6 cross the sand one by one, slipping into the cover of reeds. The road between beach and rail bed is crossed on knees and elbows. The rail line stands a short distance beyond, edged with rough ballast. The smell of grease and the taste of iron on the air increase as the party closes on the target. One man moves ahead to stand watch 40 or 50 meters along the line. Another kneels with his back to the group and listens for the regular draft of a light wind that can hide small movements. The work starts. The selection of the exact sleeper is quick but not hurried. A shallow depression is cut under the edge of the tie, careful not to rattle stones against the web of the rail. The electrician lays the contact assembly so that the slightest deflection of the rail will bring 2 protected faces together with enough force to guarantee closure. He covers the components with a layer of earth that duplicates the previous texture. The leads are set in a route that will not draw the eye. The charge is seated with its weight aligned to throw upward into the underframe of a locomotive rather than sideways into the ballast. The wire is brushed with dirt where it meets the surface. The scene is made to look as an undisturbed section looks in low light. The final check is a tug on the line and a confirmatory movement of the contact arm under a gloved hand. Then the men pull back. While they work, another train passes on a neighboring stretch. It is useful. Its noise covers the small scrape of a tool and the shift of a knee. One man goes prone while it passes so close that dust enters his nostrils. The ground falls still. The watchers exchange the hand signal for completion. The group retraces its way in reverse order, reached by the faint profile of reeds and the low seam of surf. The boat guards show an open palm. No lights. The first boat pushes off, then the second. The men row as though the act of rowing itself will draw the boat closer. The slow shelf of shallow water extends farther than memory had promised. The submarine in the offing is already aligned to head out on recovery. The voices on her bridge are muted and functional. The boats close the last yards, hands take wrists. Equipment is passed up and forward, the rubber is dragged and lashed, and the engine order comes without commentary. A sound like a slow drum beat enters through the hull plating. The train that matters now is approaching. On the shore, a bright cone opens ahead of the locomotive, and limited details become visible posts, a signboard, a stretch of brush. The men who had their hands in the ballast are on deck now, with life jackets still on. Every motion on deck is crisp but unforced. The boat creeps ahead at the restrained speed that suits shallow water and limited underkeel clearance. Then a short, heavy flash lifts earth and metal. The blast is not a fireworks display. It is a dense, concentrated hit. The sound comes dense and low across the water, and a distinct vibration pulses through the air and then expends itself into the open sea. For a second, nothing verbal is said anywhere. Then shore voices overlap into orders and shouts. Somewhere a whistle blows and blows again without pattern. The oars and the rubber craft are already inboard. The submarine heads for depth and distance at a pace made safe by the charted shoals. The first bearing change comes exactly where the navigator had marked it earlier in the afternoon. The next comes when the depth sounder and memory agree that the hull has sufficient water under it to allow a steadier run. The crew on the bridge confirms what the men at the plot already understand. The boat is clear of the only line of direct pursuit that local boats could manage on short notice. Interior routine resumes as if a switch has been thrown back to a known position. One man checks lashings that do not need checking. Another recites the stages of the approach in his head and then stops. Later, a cautious circuit offshore shows the predictable effects of the detonation in the administrative sense. Posts along the line are lit more brightly than before. A greater number of small patrols traverse the same piece of ballast on foot. Signals repeat up and down the line. Forward units report to rear units in rapid sequence. Phrases familiar to the watchers appear again. Air activity suspected and possible enemy planes, because those are the drawers into which sudden lights and flame are placed by habit. This is the central point of the night's work. Material damage is confined to a limited physical location and a limited number of cars, but the mental map of the defenders becomes uncertain. When a fixed system can no longer assume that shoreline is the neutral edge of its world, it spends time and energy in all directions. That expenditure is the return on the risk at the rail. Patrol continues. On subsequent nights, short climbs to the surface put rockets into shoreline structures that matter more for routine than for raw weight storehouses, sheds, a guardroom near a pier, a lantern pole at a small jetty. The deck gun is used when the outline of a small garrison or a boat at anchor sits where a few shells will add to the intended confusion. The aim is limited and practical. Keep the shoreline awake, keep it looking at the wrong quadrant of the sky, keep it moving in the dark so that no unit thinks it knows what will happen next. The radar watch reports a modest increase in small moving returns near coastal stations. That is useful. Each of those returns is a motor that burns fuel and bearings and keeps crews outside at hours they would rather be below a roof. Inside the boat, the pattern is the one learned on earlier patrols, adjusted for northern weather and short nights. The engineering watch tends the diesels on the surface, then tends the batteries when the boat is down. Ventilation changes tone with each transition. The sonar watch phrases reports in the same spare language that it used in warmer seas further south. The deck stowage for the rockets is inspected for salt and corrosion after each run. The crew sleeps in the same shifts it has always used. The cook serves the same coffee. The only unusual rhythm is the one introduced by quick climbs to periscope depth for bearings on headlands, then quick descents to remove the risk of being silhouetted against first light. Communication with higher command follows a restrained schedule. Not every success becomes a long message. The value is in continuity rather than in a boast. When the boat retires to a range beyond routine coastal craft, the men at the table summarize quietly what they have seen through the last set of actions. Multiple shoreline positions showed lights at hours that had been dark before. Patrols walked rail stretches in irregular patterns. Several reports clearly misattributed the source of fires inland, and a sequence of small changes across 20 or 30 miles of coast suggest that the defenders are trying to answer a problem they have not correctly defined. The conclusion is spare. Resources are being pulled thin across a wide frontage. Approach to the end of the patrol happens as a natural consequence of fuel state, ammunition state, engine hours, and the calendar of events beyond the boat. August is at hand. News from other theaters accelerates. It does not change the requirement for measured conduct at sea. The boat leaves the northern coast in the same methodical way it arrived, by following depth lines and agreed positions in the open ocean. The arrival at base is uncluttered. It brings clean linen, repairs due to ordinary wear, and the set of forms that capture brief accounts of actions, ammunition expended, places, and times. On paper, the rail operation occupies a limited space between information about sea states and ordinary entries about battery charging cycles. It is sufficient for the records. Inside the boat, the event has a different weight. In quiet voices, men repeat the part that belongs to tactile memory rather than to language. The touch of wet soil under a sleeper, the release in the chest after the last earth was brushed over the wire, and the particular short quality of the blast when a large object meets a precise charge. The after effect on the coast remains relevant in a broader way than the number of cars damaged. Local units are required to maintain a higher state of alertness across more hours. Schedules for small boats change and are less efficient. Patrols on the rail bed consume manpower. When a small force compels a larger force to consume time this way, it moves the balance beyond what a simple count of damage would suggest. The lesson is not romantic and requires no adjectives. It is a demonstration of the value of the right tool used in the only minute that matters. The technical points deserve plain treatment. 8 men left the submarine. 2 guarded the boats. 6 moved to the railroad. A charge of sufficient weight was seated in the ballast. A concealed contact was arranged so that rail deflection under a locomotive would complete the circuit without requiring guessing at a timetable. The route in and out was chosen for cover, not for comfort. The submarine remained closer to land than doctrine would prefer in order to shorten the interval between recovery and safe water. The return was made at a pace compatible with the depth available. The resulting detonation destroyed a section of rail, overturned the front of a train, and triggered a set of reflex actions by the defenders that continued for days and contradicted their own attributions. The internal routine of the submarine shows why such an action is possible without flamboyance. Day after day, the boat runs a cycle that is rehearsed to a point beyond thought. Periscope discipline keeps exposures short. Bearings on known headlands are taken and checked against the plot. Radar use is conditioned by the presence of coastal sets on the other side. The firing of rockets from a submarine is an innovation in this theater, but its handling is integrated into normal surface routines: open, load, check elevation, fire, secure, clear decks. Each such firing further supports the defender's error of attribution. Reports that speak of aircraft when the cause is maritime do not merely mislabel a picture, they trigger preparations that look up instead of out to sea, and resources go to the wrong place. Inside the compartments, the men move in compact lines of responsibility. In the control room, the trim is adjusted for each change from surface to periscope depth. Orders are spoken in ordinary tones because everyone knows where to stand and what to do. In the maneuvering room, engineers adjust levers that they can operate with their eyes closed, but they do not because procedure is kept as written even when familiarity is complete. The torpedo rooms are quiet because the mission at hand is not a torpedo mission. The gun crew, when it is called, climbs the ladder in the same order and falls back in the same order. The cook sets out food in a narrow passage so that men can eat and return to watch on time. The electrician who handled the switch under the sleeper resumes his normal billet and checks a panel because that is what comes next. The shoreline's response pattern after the detonation displays properties that a student of defenses can measure. Guard rotations increase in frequency. Lights at observation posts burn longer. Runners carry messages between points that formerly relied on routine. This is visible at night in the path of lanterns that should not be out. Where rails cross gullies, additional men stand, not because an order describes that exact post, but because the men with local authority prefer to guard any gap twice rather than leave it as before. Along small piers, sentries look toward the land and the sky with more intensity than toward the line of surf. Each of these small acts is understandable. Each has a cost in alertness and fuel. Taken together, they represent the shift that the submarine intended to cause. The late summer of the war overlays all of this. Announcements of events far from the northern coast arrive by relay and rumor and then by confirmation. They do not erase what was learned on this patrol. The submarine's last runs are conducted at the same level of care as the first runs in earlier months. Depth under the keel is watched to the foot. Bearings are called out in the concise style that never wastes a word. The boat's arrival at its forward base is recorded, and the campaign's end approaches. Formal recognition follows administrative paths. It acknowledges the cumulative work, and within that work, the land action that stands out by type rather than by tonnage. The boat's emblem will later show a small train silhouette on a campaign tally. The meaning of that symbol for the men is not decorative. It records a night when a vessel built to fight in water and a crew trained to use it in that medium applied their skill to an objective that lay just past the surf line and then returned to the sea in the same hour. For a channel that tells the story without embellishment, the sequence can be conveyed in plain language and it will still carry weight. The coast in July 1945 was not empty. It was organized to meet standard forms of threat with standard measures. A submarine exploited that organization by producing a non-standard event at a junction point, where steel on land carried steel that sustained garrisons. The means required were modest compared to larger operations. The timing demanded was strict. The risk was not theatrical. It was the risk that attaches to shallow water, to oars in a cold sea, to hands digging beneath a sleeper while a guard might cough from a tower. The effect went beyond the downed cars. It required the defenders to redraw their mental map of where danger originated and when it might arrive. Technical considerations support every sentence in that account. The party size remained small to reduce the noise at the scene and the time required to place the charge. The terrain was selected for ground cover instead of for the shortest line ashore. The firing method removed the need for a human decision at the moment of detonation and therefore removed the greatest source of error. The submarine's recovery posture was set before the boats touched the water so that a single engine order would take the hull seaward after the last man was aboard. Radar and periscope discipline kept the boat unseen by habit rather than by luck. Engines were run only as required and at rates that matched the water under the keel. In each step, the routine of submarine operation made the special task possible. That is the plain outline. A coastal sector in northern Japan in July 1945, A submarine lands 8 men by night. A charge is seated in the ballast under a rail and connected through a contact that responds to the locomotive's weight. The detonation cuts the line and topples the head of the train. The party returns. The boat withdraws. The shore command spends days responding on a misdrawn map of causes. The submarine adds brief rocket and gun strikes on later nights to reinforce the misattribution and keep the coast busy. The submarine returns to base in early August. Reports are filed. The operation endures in the memory of those who did the work because it joined sea, land, and timing into one short interval that was carried out exactly as planned. The closing points require no rhetoric. The action did not need extraordinary equipment. It needed men who could keep quiet, dig cleanly, and hide what they had done in a pattern of soil and stone. It needed a boat that could remain where doctrine would prefer it not to remain for a short time, so that recovery would be direct. It needed a commander who would accept that risk because the return was clear. It needed a coastal system that would obey the habits of its paperwork and call an explosion an air raid, because that phrase lay ready to hand. Nothing in that set is romantic. Everything in it can be taught, repeated, and understood. The war's end placed the event into the ledger of a final patrol. It changed nothing about the physics of the rail bed or the character of the men who worked in it for minutes and then vanished. In later years, the boat's name would appear again in other contexts, and in museums, the small train mark would appear on a banner where other symbols recorded ships sunk and missions completed. The value of the symbol is that it reminds the viewer that a submarine once reached past the surf, applied its skills to a piece of shore infrastructure at exactly the right time, and thereby forced a larger system to spend days on the wrong tasks. That is the lesson a plain account preserves, and it is enough. Life on the boat either side of the operation remains the same in all ordinary respects, and shows why such a mission fits within an otherwise maritime tour. The watchbill does not change for a single night raid. Men rotate between control room, bridge, sonar, radio, engine spaces, and their bunks. Maintenance cards are punched. Battery voltages are logged with the usual precision. The rain that sometimes marks these latitudes in July strikes deck and bridge, combing without meaning. The salt dries on steel and is washed again in the routine of the next surface interval. The rockets are checked for fuses and wiring. The gun crew inspects the breach with the same care it learned thousands of miles south. The small boats are stowed as if they will never be used again, and as if they will be needed in an hour. Both conditions are true in a submarine's way of thinking. Signals intelligence for the boat at this range is minimal. The Radio Shack copies plain weather and occasional operational broadcasts and transmits sparingly by plan. There is no desire to satisfy curiosity with traffic. A submarine's advantage is created at the level of bearings and soundings and the mental arithmetic of distance to shore. It is spent in minutes, and a poor transmission discipline can waste days of quiet approach. The men who worked on the rail do not need to see confirmation in a message. They can read the shore's behavior through binoculars and through the subset of flashes that rise from sheds and guard posts after midnight. They do not offer interpretations in narrative form. They report observations, and those are enough. The selection of the rail site uses a geometry that could be drawn on paper in a classroom. A gentle curve puts lateral stress on sleepers and rails. Small culverts offer visual breaks. The ground near the seaside of the rail bed is often less trampled by local foot traffic because most movement comes from the landward side. A small dip invites the wire to lie in it. The crew chose what any trained eye would choose under those constraints. The timing used another piece of geometry. Trains on lines that serve garrisons arrive when men are still awake near midnight or when men are drowsy near dawn. The party set the charge so that either condition would produce the same physical effect at the rail. The boat's position at recovery used a third triangle: distance to shore, depth under keel, and time needed to reach safe water. The navigator and the officer of the deck chose numbers that balanced those legs. That is all. On shore, the aftermath follows a pattern common to all fixed defenses forced to handle a blow that does not fit their routine. The most immediate superior asks subordinates to report everything quickly. Subordinates describe what they can see and what they have words for. The wrong box on a form, once ticked, populates higher-level summaries with a mislabel. Then resources move, and the next night follows the wrong pattern. Patrols on rails replace the observation of surf and dunes. Lights at posts burn longer and louder. That produces a better report tomorrow because the form for air events is mature and clear. Meanwhile, the submarine looks at the pattern it has created and sees no reason to change the method. The approach to base and the end of the patrol conclude the story. The tangible result is a section of rail torn out and a head of a train overturned. The intangible but measurable result is a redistribution of enemy attention and energy across several nights and positions, all in response to a cause the enemy misidentified. The men who dug a hole under a sleeper return to their usual stations. They add nothing to their uniforms that would mark them to outsiders as anything other than sailors who served on a submarine. Their account of what they did is as short as the one you have read, and it serves. It ascribes success to tools that worked and to a decision that was clear, not to luck or to words without number. That is the complete dry account a narrator can record without headings or ornament. It is sufficient to support a voice track for a program that treats the subject as a historical operation executed in a specific place and month by named types of men using ordinary means. It relies on the physical facts of rail, ballast, wire, and explosive, and the habits of mind in a coastal defense at the end of a long war. It describes the approach, the work, the detonation, the recovery, and the consequence. It needs no other thing to carry its point.